All right. Thank you very much for joining us. Just want to make sure, names again, Kally.
Yeah.
Kally and Malaysia.
Ikigai.
Ikigai.
Yes.
Oh, I said it in very very English, very Sutu. Ikigai. Yes. All right. So we are obviously, like I said, we are speaking into inclusive innovation, reframing accessibility as a strategic advantage in the AI, in the age of AI, rather. So we'll start with you, Kally. So how can organizations shift their mindset from viewing accessibility as a compliance requirement? We've spoken so much about just ticking that box, and rather seeing it as a driver of information, of an innovation rather, and competitive advantage.
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think the first place for us to start is really by stop seeing accessibility as something that's associated with people living with disabilities.
Yes.
Because I think even before we can talk about it as a compliance framework, that's essentially where it's always being tagged and placed. And also when you just look at whether it's a business benefit or a customer benefit, it's always just been framed from a lens of disability.
Yeah.
But so if we can unlearn to not see it as just that and make it something that's accessible for everyone.
Yes.
And then I think then the second piece is about how do we then move from the policy into changing it into something that we do and live every day. It's about then linking into our EVP. So when you look at the employer value proposition and going into what is the employee experience that you're selling to the candidates that are either within your organization or that are external.
Yeah.
If you can then start living that, you then move from that compliance and policy typical framework, but rather into really, really saying that this is what we've been telling you our EVP is, and this is essentially really what it is. And then I think the third layer is then tapping into your employee network resource groups, because that's also where the power lives in terms of how do you then take away the stigma, the misconceptions around accessibility. And I think Microsoft and Google are doing a really, really good job of teaching us what that looks like. Because essentially, if you look at, let's say, Microsoft accessibility tools, even at the beginning, they were usually just framed as something that will only benefit either neurodiverse candidates or candidates that are identified as living with a disability. But now all of us are leveraging those tools, and they're making us just, you feel like you've got 2 or 3 other employees reporting to you because of how you are able to harness exactly the same features that were initially meant for a person living with disability.
Fantastic. And I like the fact that you said it's not just about disability, because most of the time when we speak about accessibility, we're just only thinking about physical disability. There's other diverse ways we can actually think about it. I'm going to come to you, Malaysia. In what ways can we have AI and automation? Because it's also a conversation that we've been having for the past 2 days. And how can we use that to intentionally design and to enhance accessibility, to empower people with disabilities, and just not only the physical disabilities in the workplace?
The physical and the ones.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask everyone to just indulge me for a minute by closing your eyes, right? Please listen to my voice as I take you through this exercise. Imagine that you're in a life or death situation, right? The clock is ticking. You have 10 seconds to save humanity. Someone hands you the envelope with the code to actually unlock it. You open up that envelope and the code is in Braille. You can open your eyes now.
Sure.
What you have felt is just a fraction of what a disabled person feels. And for me, there should be someone representative sitting in the seat right now. The reality is disabled people live in a world that was never designed for them. Whether it be a ramp into a building, whether it be color schemes on a PowerPoint presentation. And what we need to be able to do from a technology perspective, technology provides the greatest unlock for inclusion. And I'll give you a few use cases. At the last Olympics, there was someone who was paralyzed, who was able to get into an exoskeleton and walk, right? At Ikigai People, what we've done is created a virtual reality tool to place you in the shoes of the person experiencing bias, because it'll always be they, them, those people in relation to those experiences. So we use technology to give you the lived experiences of those who are impacted. So when we talk AI, I think it's also important to understand you have automation, you have augmentation, you have AI agents, and you have agentic AI. So we need to understand which of the areas we're going to be playing in. But from a design perspective, include people from day one. You know, we often hear when you're sitting at a boardroom whose voice is not represented. When you start designing products, when you start building stuff, look around to see who is not represented. And I always call it the missing voice, right? Because if you include people up front in the design, you don't have to try to retrofit it later.
Yes.
And we were raised, and I'm making huge generalizations now, to believe that it has to be this or that. Why can't it be inclusive? Why can't you include it up front? So the perfect example is, you know, on a curve of a road, on the edge of the road, at robots, you get that little ramp. Are you aware of what I'm talking about? So that was initially designed for people in wheelchairs. But mothers pushing prams use it. When you're pulling a suitcase, you use it. We underestimate what simple designs can actually expand for everyone's user experience, not just for disabled people.
I absolutely love the fact that you even brought that example up, because I'm not sure if it was you, but I heard just on radio just how many different innovations have been used or created for those that are disabled, but in fact it actually helped us, those that would say we're generally abled, to actually have a better way of doing things. So I really thank you for bringing that up. And in terms of disabilities and having inclusion as well as accessibility for those that now wanted to enter into the workplace system, but they find themselves at a place where it's not quite accessible. Right? And there's so many organizations, when we plan around inclusivity, we don't think of those things, because the first thing doesn't come to mind that, oh, there's someone who is deaf, there's someone that is blind. And even with the example that you gave us where we had to close our eyes, we never even thought that you'd actually say that the note is written in Braille. So all of us were actually dead in that moment. But how then can we now start to put that as part of our inclusive policies and even the programs that we'd have into the workplace? And anyone can take this one.
I'll go in the middle. So I think it's essentially just about looking at where do you start your journey of saying that you want multi-diverse talent. Does it start just at the people strategy, or does it start at the overall building of the organizational strategy? Because then that informs different touch points. And a simple example is currently we've got 12 official languages in South Africa. Majority of us use English and probably Afrikaans. I think Setswana, isiZulu also is now starting to play into the game. But one of the biggest things that's missing is sign language.
Yes.
And if you look at most of the employee engagement stats that are coming up now, people are having late discoveries and diagnoses in life, and majority of it is visual impairment and hearing impairment.
Yes.
What then means is that within probably between now and 2030, horrible with math, so I can't.
It's okay.
But the point is, you're gonna have a significant percentage of your workforce that is disabled and sits within those two categories, that's visually impaired and that is, hearing impaired. What that then means is that you have a team member who is unable to communicate. And it's even worse than when the person discovered the disability while they're already an adult and stuff, because it's harder and harder for them to learn. So then imagine that person goes and learns sign language outside, because then switches from being verbal to using their hands to communicate.
Yeah.
But then also then coming into a workplace, coming and dealing with a team and different stakeholders that don't have access to resources to learn sign language. So it's the basic stuff that you have to do the moment you say, I want multi multi-diverse talent, there has to be sub-strategies that talk towards that. And I think the most simplest thing at the moment is that we should be introducing sign language as an official business language, and we should then be looking at having Braille softwares as a traditional tool that you get when you join the organization.
Yeah.
Simple things like having a sign language font on your Microsoft Office. A lot of organizations don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's literally just those small things. For LGBTQ plus people is walking into an interview and seeing that a line manager or someone from the talent and acquisitions team is wearing a lanyard. Those are the small little things that tell the people that you're trying to bring in that you are trying, or you're making the progress, or at least you're committed to doing it. So I think the simplest thing is to say, let's not overcomplicate it, and let's stick to what we are saying we are actually doing, as opposed to just saying it.
Fantastic. So now tell us, what are the untapped insights and contributions that employees with disabilities can bring to an AI-driven, especially an AI-driven innovation and organizational growth? What contribution do they bring into that?
So yes, sir. I feel a bit of an imposter because I'm speaking on behalf of people.
Yeah.
But all studies, and I'd rather speak from a study perspective, indicate that people with disabilities have a higher ability to design. Because the minute I come out of my vehicle, I'm already trying to figure out how I'm going to get my wheelchair up to the reception, as an example. So that wiring is untapped potential. What is the biggest advantage we say we want to achieve? Higher productivity, more innovation. Why is it that we're not tapping into the very people that we have? Because the construct is always around, it is too hard, it costs too much money, right? But what you can actually unleash by creating more inclusivity in design itself is something that's immeasurable. And I'll give you an example, Toyota as an example, and for anyone here who has been pregnant, understands the struggle of a safety belt when you're 9 months pregnant. Toyota actually put their engineers in those bodysuits with a pregnancy bag, for them to understand what it is like when they were designing the vehicles. Now, it's a simple solve. So for me, it's having to open your mind that it's not a cost, it's actually going to add to your competitive advantage.
100%. Absolutely love that. So now we might be sitting in here in the room right now, we're just thinking, okay, so how do I, as a leader now, play in fostering that kind of culture where we are prioritizing accessibility as well as valuing diverse perspectives and using that as a strategic asset?
Lead by example. Sorry. Yeah. Lead by example. We all have affinity bias.
Yes.
Regardless of who we are. Understand what that bias is, because it impacts the way you make decisions, it impacts the team dynamics, it impacts the way you promote people. And all of the stuff you've heard all this morning, it's about the self-work that needs to be done. Because someone looks different to you does not mean it's an indication of their intelligence. Because someone walks differently from you is not an indication of their ability. So it's the self-work, which often people think is just too hard to do.
Yeah.
But just think about it this way, and I always try to personalize it. What if that was your child, your wife, or your mother? What would you do differently? The same thing applies in a workplace, in my view.
Yeah.
You want to add to that?
I think it's taking things back to the basics and just remembering that everyone is human.
Yeah.
And ultimately all of us are after the same thing. And I think when it comes to then just, hiring and stuff, I think it's also just about, there's this saying about, oh no, we won't get them, they're not a culture fit. Start embracing that and start hiring for cultural additions as opposed to a culture fit. And I mean, there's also then a new thing where we went from IQ to EQ. Now there's a new thing called culture EQ. Yes. So I mean cultural intelligence. So I think that's also a very critical skill that we kind of need to start looking at from people. And then a last thing I think would be looking at what are the qualities and skills that a person already possesses that you could be able to harness and leverage for what you are putting them forward for,
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to fit them in at last. Because ultimately, when you see that candidate on LinkedIn, the way you see them is really, really the reason why you want them to come into your organization. But the strange thing is they come in and then now you want them to fit in a box. So I think it's changing or unlearning that culture fit mentality and looking at how does it affect you. And I think then the last thing is just we need to start attaching numbers to these things, because we talk about the cost of retrofitting, but I don't think that we have actually really quantified what it is. And I think sometimes at a certain level, as you go higher, numbers are the only things that kind of click and that will make you really understand why this is important.
Speaking of numbers, I was actually going to get into that. Like, how can organizations then measure the impact of the accessibility initiatives on engagement, productivity, as well as the overall innovation outcomes? And I want you just to elaborate a little bit more on what you're saying when you speak about the numbers.
So I think scorecards are a very simple and easy place for us to leverage. For example, when you do employment equity reporting, you can stick to the typical template, or you can go the extra mile and give the department more information and a report on what your demographic actually really looks like. Because, for example, how many companies actually know their LGBTQ plus stats or real stats in terms of PWD, like outside of the actual 2 or 3% that you are trying to reach? All of those things are like the typical places that we can start in. But one of the things that I've noticed really, really works is the indexes that are out there.
Yes.
The indexes that are out there really, really, if you have the intention to change, if you have the intention to evolve, they're really a good place for you to leverage, because those different companies have gone and done the legwork of what best practice actually really looks like.
Yes.
So leaning into them is a good place to be able to know how to find your footing.
Amazing. Just one other thing. So I'm personally with the deaf community, somewhat. And what I've seen is that a lot of times, especially in the school system, we have a number of grade 1s coming in. And then by the time it's grade 12, we only have 3 or 2 people that are in matric in that school. And the problem usually, it comes just from a confidence point of view and also from a development point of view. So how can our companies, whether it's in a deaf school, whether it's a braille school, or any other schools where there are disabilities or children with disabilities, where we can actually close the gap of those with disabilities entering into workplace and also having the development that they need?
I think it's part of 2 things. One, I hate job descriptions. Nothing upsets me more than that because of the restrictive requirements. You know, a candidate attorney needs to have a vehicle and a license. I mean, let's get real. That excludes a large proportion of our population. So for me, it's the work that needs to be done around how do we look at reasonable accommodation. If you're going to look at it as a cost, it's never going to work, right? What are the factual things we need to deal with? And it is fact-based, right? An example is, everyone remember that bomb blast in Joburg city center? That road?
Yes.
Did you see the drone footage that took place from the aerial view? If you didn't, that drone footage was done by disabled drone pilots.
Wow.
Right? Now, in your mind, would you have ever thought that a disabled person could be a drone pilot? That's a form of reasonable accommodation. The person who actually spearheaded it is sitting here right now. The first disabled drone pilot project in our country. You all work for organizations, right? In your organization, if you have the will, everyone's got the budget in some way or the other, you make it happen. And all you need to do is take that added, sometimes it is a bit of a risk, right? Mitigate your risk by making sure you get to your proof of concept. Accenture did a study that shows by having disabled people in your organization, you're more innovative, you're more productive, and you're more profitable. So if your finance people want the numbers, go and have a look at it. Both Accenture and Deloitte have done studies to be able to prove that it works.
Fantastic. Kally, you want to add to that as we close?
I think hyper-personalization needs to start at, the soonest, like crèche.
Yes.
Because also we're moving into a world where, like we're saying, having a disability or being neurodiverse or just even being different is no longer now like the thing or the other. Like you're part of a community. And I think then the moment that we can embrace hyper-personalization, it teaches the child to be able to harness the things that make them different and see them as superpowers as opposed to seeing them as different things. So for example, I'm a neurodiverse person. I struggle with eye contact. Imagine the amount of meetings I've been in where someone has decided that I'm either disrespectful or any other thing because I couldn't just
Yeah.
and so it's those kind of things that put us in a position where we lose talent, and we are not just losing talent at a varsity or workplace level, but we're losing talent right from grassroots because to your point, there's 10 students. By the time you get to matric, there's only 3. So I think that hyper-personalization really, really is important. And with COVID has reflected to us that the work life has spilled into the home, and as such, the home has spilled into the workplace. And when I come to work, I come as my whole self with my anxiety, with my neurodiversity, with my kids, with my wife. All of that is there for you. And that challenges us as well to elevate the type of education and awareness conversations we're having, because people are coming as a whole, whether they're welcome or not.
100%. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think it was a much, much needed conversation to have, especially that we've been speaking so much about youth unemployment. We've been speaking about being inclusive. And I think the part that we forgot about is the disability and the accessibility. And I'm so thankful for even the Topco team just to have this conversations, just so that we can open our minds up to those that we might have even forgotten because of our bias. So thank you so much for enlightening us. And we're going to have our next conversation. So thank you very much. Please give them a huge round of applause.